The scene opens inside a quiet police station on a late afternoon. Officers shuffle through paperwork, answering phones and sipping lukewarm coffee. Nothing unusual, just another ordinary day. Suddenly, the glass doors burst open, slamming against the wall. A young black girl no older than 12 runs inside, her breathing ragged, her eyes wide with fear. The room falls silent as every officer turns to look at her. Her voice trembles, but it carries an urgency that slices through the air like a siren. "Please come quickly. You have to come now." Some officers glance at each other with raised brows, uncertain. Was this another false alarm, another childish exaggeration? But the girl's small frame shakes as she grips the edge of the desk, her knuckles white, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looks each officer in the eye, her voice breaking yet insistent. "They don't have time. Please, you have to believe me." One officer sighs and leans back in his chair, muttering under his breath about kids playing tricks, but another steps forward. He crouches slightly to meet her, eye level, studying her face, and in that moment, he sees something undeniable: raw fear, but also determination. This wasn't a prank. This was real. The girl's desperation fills the room as she stammers. "I heard them. They're trapped. They're crying for help. I couldn't just walk away. Please, please hurry." The silence in the station grows heavy, the weight of her words sinking in. The girl stands there, trembling, tears threatening to fall, but her courage keeps her voice steady. Whether the officers believed her or not, she refused to leave without them. This was no ordinary plea. It was the cry of someone carrying a truth too big for her young shoulders, a truth that demanded action. For a moment, the station stayed frozen in silence after the girl's desperate plea. Some officers exchanged skeptical glances, their expressions heavy with doubt. One leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "Probably another kid making up stories," he muttered. Another officer shrugged, unwilling to move, his voice laced with irritation. "We've got enough to deal with without chasing ghosts." The girl's eyes darted from face to face, her chest tightening, afraid they wouldn't believe her. But just as her hope began to dim, one officer, Sergeant Daniels, a man known more for his instincts than his patience, stood up, slowly adjusting his belt. His voice was firm yet calm. "I'll go," he said, his gaze locked on the trembling girl. The girl's shoulders dropped in relief, but she kept urging. "Please hurry, there's no time." Two younger officers groaned, but reluctantly rose from their desks, following behind Daniels. "If this is nothing, she's wasting our time," one whispered under his breath, but even he couldn't ignore the intensity in her tone. The girl led them out of the station, her small figure moving quickly down the cracked sidewalks of the city. The officers trailed after her, still half convinced this was a wild goose chase. With each block they passed, their boots echoed against the pavement, their skepticism clashing with the urgency in her hurried steps. As they turned a corner into a quieter, rundown part of town, the atmosphere shifted. The buildings looked tired, their paint-peeling windows boarded up, alleys littered with broken bottles and scraps of metal. The girl didn't slow, weaving through streets she seemed to know too well. The officers whispered to each other again, this time with less confidence. Her pace wasn't random, it was purposeful. She wasn't leading them on a game, she was guiding them to something. Daniels watched her closely, the doubt fading from his eyes, as he realized she wasn't acting. She was scared, yes, but she was also determined. Whatever lay ahead, it was serious. And with each hurried step, the weight of the unknown grew heavier in the air. The girl led the officers deeper into the neglected part of the city, where the streetlights flickered weakly, and the shadows seemed to swallow everything whole. She stopped suddenly in front of an old abandoned warehouse, its rusted doors chained loosely, the faded paint barely clinging to the walls. Her small hand pointed toward it, trembling but steady. "Inside there, in there," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. The officers looked at each other, hesitation flickering across their faces. One scoffed softly. "This place hasn't been used in years. What could possibly—" But Sergeant Daniels silenced him with a sharp glance. Something about the girl's eyes, the way they shimmered with both fear and truth made it impossible to dismiss her. Daniels approached the door testing the chains, and that's when they all heard it, the faintest sound from inside. At first it seemed like the wind, but then it came again, clearer this time. A muffled cry. The younger officers froze, their skepticism evaporating in an instant. They exchanged nervous glances, their hearts pounding, as the reality settled in. Someone was inside. The girl stepped forward quickly, urging, "I told you, please, they're suffering. Don't waste any more time." Her words cut through their hesitation like a blade. With renewed urgency, Daniels forced the chains loose, the rusty metal groaning as the door creaked open. A stale, suffocating air spilled out, carrying with it the undeniable scent of dampness and despair. Inside, the dim light revealed shapes huddled together, figures weak and trembling, their eyes filled with terror as they blinked at the sudden intrusion of light. Children. 3 of them no older than the girl who had led the officers there. Their faces were dirty, their clothes torn, but their cries confirmed the truth the girl had been fighting so hard for. The officers stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of their disbelief crashing down on them. All their doubts, all their hesitation now seemed shameful in the face of such a haunting reality. Daniels glanced down at the girl, his jaw tight, his chest heavy. She had been right all along. And as the echoes of the children's cries filled the warehouse, the officers realized this was no ordinary call. It was something that would stay with them forever. The moment the children's frightened eyes met theirs, the atmosphere shifted from doubt to urgency. Sergeant Daniels wasted no time, stepping fully into the warehouse, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The children flinched at the sudden movement, clutching each other tightly, but Daniels' voice softened as he crouched low. "It's okay now, you're safe. We're here to help." The girl who had brought them stood just behind him, her expression both relieved and resolute. She called out softly to the children, "It's all right, they came. You can trust them." Her words seemed to calm the little ones, their cries fading into quiet sobs of exhaustion. The younger officers followed, their earlier reluctance replaced with determination. They quickly shed their jackets, wrapping them around the trembling bodies of the children. Each child clung desperately, too weak to speak, but their grip spoke volumes. Fear was slowly being replaced by the fragile hope of safety. Daniels turned to his team, his voice steady but urgent. "Radio for backup and medics. Now!" One officer scrambled for his radio, his voice shaking as he relayed the situation, fully aware of the gravity of what they had stumbled into. As they led the children out of the suffocating warehouse, the night air felt like a breath of freedom. The girl who had started it all walked beside them, her head held high despite the tears in her eyes. She reached out and gently squeezed the hand of the youngest child, reassuring her with a nod. For the first time since they had left the station, the officers looked at her differently, not as a child with wild claims, but as the reason these lives were being saved. The flashing lights of approaching patrol cars and ambulances painted the street in red and blue. Neighbors, awakened by the commotion, began to gather, murmuring in shock as the children were carried out. The girl stood silently watching as paramedics rushed forward, her chest rising with both relief and pride. What had begun as her lonely plea in a police station had turned into the rescue of innocent lives. And in that moment, the officers finally understood the depth of her courage. She hadn't just asked for help, she had demanded justice. As the paramedics carefully tended to the children, wrapping them in blankets and guiding them into the safety of the ambulance, the girl stood quietly to the side. The flashing lights illuminated her face, streaked with tears she had fought to hold back for too long. Sergeant Daniels approached her gently, his usually stern voice now softened. "You did something incredible tonight," he said, crouching so his eyes met hers. But instead of pride, her eyes filled with fresh tears, and she whispered, "I couldn't just stay quiet because I used to be one of them." The officers froze, the weight of her words sinking in. She explained haltingly at first, then with growing emotion, how she too had once been locked away in that same warehouse. Her escape had been a miracle, but the guilt of leaving others behind had haunted her every night since. She had gone to the police before, but no one listened. This time she swore she wouldn't stop until the truth was seen, even if it meant reliving her own nightmares. Her small hand shook as she wiped her cheeks, her voice breaking. "I just couldn't let them suffer like I did." Silence fell over the group, broken only by the hum of ambulance engines and the soft cries of the rescued children. Some of the officers lowered their heads in shame, remembering how easily they had dismissed her plea hours earlier. Daniels placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his own eyes glistening. "You're braver than any of us tonight," he admitted. As the ambulances pulled away, the girl finally allowed herself a trembling breath, a mix of relief and grief spilling from her in quiet sobs. The truth had come out, painful, raw, but undeniable. And though the scars of her past would remain, so too would the undeniable fact that her courage had saved lives. On that night, her tearful truth not only freed the innocent, but opened the eyes of everyone who had once refused to believe. And so what began as a young girl's desperate plea ended with lives saved, truths revealed, and hearts forever changed. Her courage shattered the silence that so many had ignored, and in doing so she reminded the world of something we often forget, that bravery doesn't always come from those in power, but from those who refuse to give up even when no one believes them. The officers who once doubted her walked away that night with a new understanding of justice and a deeper respect for the strength hidden in the most unlikely of places. As the ambulances disappeared into the night and the crowd slowly dispersed, the girl stood taller than she had in a long time. She had faced her past, spoken her truth, and turned her pain into a lifeline for others. Her story is a reminder to all of us: never dismiss a voice because it seems small, never overlook a cry for help because it sounds inconvenient. Sometimes the smallest voice carries the power to change everything. And sometimes, like tonight, it takes just one act of courage to bring light to the darkest places.